before, but I knew what was happening.
All right. Please welcome to the stage Ed Marshall and Chris Urwin. So Chris has been the UK technical lead of Rancher Labs, and Ed has been a consultant at InfinityWorks, and they've been working together to make dynamic monitoring with Prometheus possible, and that's what they're going to tell you about.
That's stolen our thunder for the first slide. So I'm Chris Urwin. I've been working for Rancher Labs for about 6 months now.
Ed Marshall. So I work at InfinityWorks. I've worked with Chris in a previous role, and sort of came across Rancher and Prometheus at the same time. So did some work with Chris and did some work with Rancher, and sort of snowball from there. And we'll kind of go into that in the presentation.
So we're just going to give you sort of a bit of a background about the companies that we work for and how we came across dynamic monitoring and sort of link the two together with Rancher and Prometheus.
Cool.
Okay, can I just ask, who's heard of Rancher Labs? Oh, excellent. That's good. That's good. Yeah. So we've got It's always a surprise because you never know. Because when you go and speak at a Docker conference, it's like pretty much every hand goes up. When you're at a Prometheus conference, you're never quite sure what's going to happen. So so we've got two main products. We've got Rancher Server, which is our container management platform, and we've got Rancher OS. So I'm going to go into the Rancher Server piece a little bit later on in the presentation. But Rancher OS, just very quickly, is basically a very lightweight, cut-down Linux distribution that runs Docker as PID1. So it's basically a Dockerized operating system. It's about 30 meg when installed, and it's sort of very, very small footprint if you're wanting to run a Docker environment on a bunch of hosts. So there's AMIs up on AWS and various other places you can get the image, and it's worth having a look at if you're running Docker in production.
Cool. I'm InfinityWorks, so I won't bore you too much, but InfinityWorks, we're a consultancy, and we tend to sort of be a collection of people who've made various mistakes and then hopefully have learned from them. So, what do we do? We're helping companies solve problems. We're UK based, so we don't have an office out here. And my role in that is using technology as an enabler to sort of resolve those issues for them. So, doing a lot of work with a lot of good companies, and that's how I first met Chris as well. All right, so concept. So dynamic monitoring. So this changed whilst I was making these slides, and I'll completely admit we made these slides recently. So dynamic monitoring, what does it mean? I think originally I had the scope of thinking service discovery principally. Now, I think it's probably a little bit more than that, to be fair. So first off, to me, dynamic monitoring should be open source, something that can contribute, adapt to the solution of your platform. Perfect example yesterday, Vulkan. I've worked with the usual stuff which gets boos and hisses, and I've worked with some other sort of proprietary solutions in the past. And the frustration is always, obviously, with the closed source project, going back and not being able to know what it's doing behind the scenes and not being able to actively contribute. So to us, this is a massive thing. And more companies working with now are sort of dictating open source first, which you would think would be a norm, and it might be for companies like Google, but there's a lot of companies still sort of reaching that stage, I think it's fair to say. Dynamic monitoring. So it should be extendable through easy-to-write exporters. We've written our own for Rancher originally. They're nice and easy. There's some really good docs as well up on the Prometheus site. Should be able to collect and store information en masse before you need it. So I'll come back to that in a later slide, but it's an important one, and in my mind, one of the biggest sort of pitfalls of previous monitoring systems like Nagios as well. Service discovery as well. So service discovery, a few people have talked about it, so I've taken some stuff out of this slide. So DNS-based discovery. Now this is where I principally came across sort of how to use service discovery. So first time we took Prometheus, we deployed it in, we populated the config file with a set of known hosts, and that was that, and we're on our way. And that worked really, really well. But then when we came to use it across multiple environments, obviously we hit the natural issues, and it's like, do I need Chef to manage this file? And then fortunately, these guys had already solved it. So Rancher predominantly operates with it supports lots of methods, but predominantly it's DNS. So you can say to Rancher, I want to know where these servers are, and it will return that stuff through DNS. And I really like DNS because it's really simple. It's kind of everywhere. There's a whole host of tools you can use across it. I appreciate it's not as advanced as something like Console, but if you're in a smaller environment or test demo type thing or proof of concept or a hack day or something, it's perfect for that sort of stuff. Obviously, there's console as your EC2. I probably won't really go into any detail. They're there for populating all of your configuration. They work really well. You don't need to reload Prometheus to take advantage of those as well. And probably this has sort of been touched on, the file-based service discovery. So the common use case for this, I think, for file-based is when people have a configuration management tool like Chef or Puppet. They use that configuration management tool to parse that file, and they set a notification in their tool to restart Prometheus when that file's been modified, or to issue a command to Prometheus. I've actually used it in another way. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with a product called ConfD by Kelsey Hightower. So that's a really nice written in Go. It's just a lightweight. It's not a configuration management tool, but it's something that allows you to interpolate things like variables and things, and it's got a number of backends. Now, one of those backends is the Rancher metadata service. So I'm able to use the Rancher metadata service in combination with ConfD to populate sort of advanced level metrics from hosts. So if I stood up we'll show this in the demo, but if I stood up a big stack inside my environment, I could give it a specific label, and through the API in this metadata service, I can identify that label and automatically add it in. So that's pretty cool as well, because I don't need to know what its DNS name will be. So why is monitoring changing, in my mind, I guess? Contrary to the use cases I think we've seen here, which is really cool, we've seen some like massive scale stuff, and we've seen people really pushing the boundaries of engineering. For every SoundCloud, things like that, there's probably 100 small organizations using these tools. So I've just finishing up working in the NHS, and they're using Prometheus on a number of key projects, and we're not using it for health metrics, we're using it for sort of server metrics, and we're using it as a replacement for your kind of typical Nagios stuff. There's tons and tons of examples where people are taking Prometheus and monitoring environments with it, but it doesn't have to be 10,000 hosts. And I think someone in a presentation yesterday said the great thing about Prometheus is how you can just deploy it and run, and you're going with pretty minimal config. That's really, really important. So why is monitoring changing? Your business is evolving every minute, every day, yet only Bob looks after monitoring. He's on leave until next Tuesday. So this genuinely happened, although he wasn't called Bob. This is a really important one. Monitoring, from my operational background, comes as a bit of a it's an afterthought. It's a necessary evil. It's something ops look at, and your level above will typically get things through the call center and things, and they don't really pay attention. You've got horrible kind of Nagios screens. It's never really been a first-class citizen. So the thing for me around monitoring changing is all of a sudden you've got, with the advent of things like cloud computing and stuff, you've got very skilled developers and individuals contributing towards projects like Prometheus and everything like that. Infrastructure tooling in the last 5 years has come an insane way. It's so much more mature and resilient and manageable and open source and everything than it used to be. So in my mind, there's a lot of learning when I go into an organization around how they treat monitoring. And that's not just monitoring for me as an engineer. It might be presenting dashboards to 24/7 teams who operate service desks. It might be for a product owner to see how many users are currently placing bets or something. And another important thing is troubleshooting an unforeseen issue that's already happened. So how many times, working in a company, do you see a change request to enable more logging or add monitoring for this because they've had a problem in production? The nice thing about, I think someone said yesterday, it might have been Brian, saying there's like 600 or 700 metrics alone in the Prometheus node exporter. The nice thing about that is if you get a disk problem later on, you might not have these graphs on your dashboard, but you can go back, create them, you've got all of your historical data, and Prometheus is dead efficient at providing that information. So all of a sudden where you had to add a monitor into something like Nagios, you've got it all there straight away for you to hit. And finally, embed good practice in our development team. So this, again, sort of SoundClouds and things like that are already looking at our applications. A lot of more modern applications might have a /metrics endpoint. They might have a /health endpoint for health checking. There's a ton that don't, and there's a lot of people operating third-party products that don't necessarily have the control over. So where possible, through development teams, we're trying to do training around getting them to understand why metrics are important. And how they can use them in their tools and what the benefits are. And Prometheus is sort of a really easy way to demonstrate that. Yeah.
So how did we get to Prometheus? So as Ed mentioned, we were working together before, and we were moving from a static infrastructure, moving to a sort of a more dynamic infrastructure using Docker. And so we started looking around, and we had to have a rethink of the tool sets surrounding the platform. And Ed's already mentioned the N word that everyone seems to always get rid of. And we were using that within this, and we found that it just doesn't bend itself nicely to a dynamic environment. Great for static stuff, but it doesn't bend itself to the dynamic environment. So we started looking around, and I think we tried everything that was on the market at the time. So this was, 16 months ago. So we tried pretty much everything on the market at the time, and there was lots of things that were quite immature and didn't sort of give us what we wanted. And then we sort of came across Prometheus and liked what it did, and it seemed to give us a step forward, and it's sort of been progressing ever since. One of the key requirements on the program that we're on, it was a government program, is that it had to be open source. Basically, we weren't allowed to spend money purchasing licenses. We didn't want vendor lock-in. We wanted to be able to do stuff, basically crack open the code if we needed to and investigate why it wasn't working, not have to rely on support contracts where we had to phone someone up and wait for a call back 4 hours later and explain the scenario. So the open source one was key to what we were doing. So we started using Rancher. And so Rancher is a complete container management system for Docker. It's open source. You can have a look at us on GitHub/Rancher. You can do pull requests. You can fork our code. You can do whatever you like with it, but it'd be great if anyone wants to contribute to it. So what do? We orchestrate Docker containers. We're the only product that I'm aware of that's open source that will actually allow you to use the three main orchestration engines that we put out there. So that's Docker Swarm, Mesos, and Kubernetes. And we've also got our own orchestrator called Catalog. We're infrastructure agnostic. You can run us in the cloud. You can bridge the cloud to your local data center with us with our overlay network. And basically, we just run Docker at scale. So a few stats about us. We've got over 4,000 GitHub stars. We've got 1 million Docker pulls. That's not bad for a project that's only been around for just over 12 months. And we've got enterprise features built in there. So we've got authentication. You can authenticate to an AD. You can authenticate to an LDAP directory and a local database and stuff. So this is sort of where we're coming to with the Prometheus stuff. As part of the Rancher server, we have this thing called a catalog. So the catalog's got 3 parts to it. We've got a certified catalog, which is basically things that we've written that we will support as part of any support contract. We've got the private catalog, where you can create your own catalog that you can then pull down your Docker images and everything from and sort of do your descriptions. And we've got a community catalog. And this is just a snapshot of the community catalog. And this is basically where a lot of places, open source companies, have put together their own templates for defining predefined Docker solutions. So this is a bunch of containers that run together. And basically, I brought Ed along today because he put together the Prometheus one for us. So now what we're going to do is give you a quick demo of the Prometheus Catalog and how easy it is to go from 0 to nothing and basically have some basic monitoring.
If you give me a sec.
Sorry, yeah, we'll go from 0 to... So 0 to having a level of monitoring that gives you sort of an insight into your house.
Did you actually say that?
I did say that.
All right, so we've got a...
You won't forget me now.
Yeah, that's just the tagline you want.
Yeah.
So here we are. We've got a Rancher set up in the cloud on AWS. Here's one we made earlier. We've got a sample application running in here. For those who've been to DockerCon, they've rolled this out a few times. It's just the red, blue, green voting app. Just as an example that there's an application running and something we can sort of monitor as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you deployment of Prometheus. So I've got into the catalog, and this is the combination of the community catalog, which is user submissions, and like a central maintain one that Rancher do for sort of certified products, things like this. So in here, I'm not going to browse and find it. So I'll just search, and there's Prometheus. Now it's a bit, I sort of say Prometheus and friends. This is a collection of tools that we're going to deploy. And here we go. So we click in, got some info about the type of components which are going to be deployed. We're going to select our version, which is the templated version. It's not the version of Prometheus. We're going to give our stack a name. We're saying we're just starting the services right after we've launched it. This is where we pray to the demo gods. And Rancher should then go away, stand up a stack. So let's have a look whilst that's doing that. I say whilst that's doing that. Let's see if we can go to the next slide. Is really hard to use at this angle.
Screen there as well.
Yeah, that does make it easier, although I've lost my mouse now. So if we look at what we're deploying here on this slide, these are the components that we're interested in. We're deploying a Grafana instance. We are deploying a Prometheus instance at the heart of it as our sort of engine. Back here we're using the node exporter. Again, great piece of product. Then these two things are things we wrote. So Rancher is an interesting one. As part of Rancher's sort of infrastructure and how it manages all of its hosts, it has a secret C advisor process running inside the Rancher agent, which goes out on each of the hosts. Rancher is just a HA proxy set to expose that available. So it means that I can see what Rancher's looking at, and I don't have to run another copy of C advisor. And then there's this Prometheus, it says Rancher exporter at the end. Now that is something we wrote, and that is a Prometheus exporter for the Rancher API. I was quite pleasantly surprised the other day to have had over 50,000 pull requests, 50,000 pulls on the Docker image for that as well. So it's far more popular than I think I've given it credit for. And it also makes me worry about the type of coding that's in there. But so here we go. It's in that time Rancher stood up an environment. So let's have a look at what we've got. We've got there is something in here someone's going to tell me off for, which is a little bit legacy. I think there's InfluxDB. It's not actually used in the demo today, and we'll remove it with a pull request. But the long short of it, that was there for some graphite integration we were doing with another product. We don't particularly use it now. So we've got our tools here. So if I have a look at Prometheus here, just open here. Yeah, so you can see I've got a Prometheus server. I can query the node objects, things like boot time and things, and I can get them back for all of my hosts in the environment straight away. If we close that, we've got a sort of pre-built Grafana instance, and that's here. Here we go. I'll log in with a super secret username. Yeah, no one will ever guess that. No, I don't want to save it. Cool, so we've got some dashboards set up here. These are sort of the majority of people who come across this catalog entry are people sort of experiencing these tools for the first time. So I've tried to make it fairly simple in how people can experience this. So the first thing is this is container stats. So we're just demonstrating. We're pulling information back from C Advisor through that Rancher proxy we talked about before. Here is an integration with the Rancher API, and it's showing us all of the active Rancher services as well. And then if we go back up on here and I look at host stats, so we're making use of the templating available to us in Grafana here. We've got host stats starting to appear. Appreciate it doesn't look particularly pretty because I've only just deployed this. It does in an hour or two. We have the hosts list, and we can independently select stuff or select a combination of the hosts that we're querying it from, and we're pulling back all of the sort of usual stuff. Again, this is pretty similar to the in the Grafana demonstration that went on. There's a number of host graphs available in the template catalog, and we're checking all the kind of basic stuffs again, pulling some stuff around from the API. Generic sort of host stats that users might want to interrogate. We've got Prometheus stats dashboard, and this is just for the internal Prometheus server, and we've also got a stack status. So this is a demonstration of we're able to query Rancher to get the health status of the services that are running. So you can query the stack level as well, which is that Prometheus stack we deployed, but we're actually querying the individual service level, and that means that these services are running and that they're passing a health check. So straight away we can, don't get me wrong, Rancher supports read-only users and things, but I don't particularly like opening up access to something that has such a lot of power in one place. So one of the things we do in a lot of organizations, we expose that stuff out using the exporters, and we just create a nice dashboard up here. So if people know there's a problem, it's available through Grafana rather than giving them access directly to a kind of orchestration tool. Yeah, I'll do my best to get back to the slides, no promises.
So what it shows is you can very quickly get something up and running and show someone some stats very quickly with a nice Prometheus interface using Grafana, with very little technology sort of knowledge.
Cool. I haven't got the presenter notes. That's all right. So, what do we think about monitoring? I've gone too far there. So, opportunity to rid ourselves of legacy monitoring solutions based on outdated principles. So, right, when a new technology comes along, often you'll want to sort of go down that path and have a look at it because it's shiny. But this is a genuine opportunity, I think, for systems and teams and in general, I think, to be able to sort of rid themselves of that legacy thing. You know, Nagios, despite how much we slate it, lasted a very long time. It was very successful and it did do its job. But this is a real opportunity, I think, with this sort of, as the community has grown and Grafana's come to mature stage, Prometheus went version 1 recently. It's a real opportunity to sort of rid ourselves of that stuff and change the way we think about monitoring. Another thing is building monitoring into the solutions from the get-go. So I talked before about dev teams, but it's about making developers think about how what a metric is and how they can monitor that at a later stage. And the ability to demonstrate value of monitoring, not only to our engineers, but to all the key stakeholders in systems. So monitoring is great and being an engineer is great and it's all exciting, but sometimes, you know, you're running these services on behalf of customers and exposing that information out to them is key. And finally, understanding the differences between metrics, logs and events. I'll admit, I still have sort of arguments about this all the time. So, you know, we work in some environments and some customers that have huge deployments of various log systems like Elastic and things, and deciding the difference between what constitutes a metric, what constitutes a log and what constitutes an event is sometimes a little bit of a blurry area, and understanding which you should do and then how that tracks back to things like audit and security as well. So that's, I mean, my main angle there being the cheapness of a metric, especially the talk done yesterday around storage was excellent, you know, detailing down to how many bits, you know, we can record a metric in and how little time and processing power that takes is always a big benefit to me because, let's be honest, some of those logging systems, I won't name names, are very, very expensive and logging is expensive in general. So that sort of diagram of how things fit together and how things connect is always a little bit vague for me, and I think it's something that as an understanding will get better with time. And I think that's it for us really.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Yeah, any questions?
Yep. So how would I configure persistent storage in Rancher? Does it provide an abstraction for, say, like mounting a volume into the container, or?
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways. So we provide the one certified entry that was up there before for the NFS Convoy. Basically, that provides a way to mount basically NFS shares through to your Rancher server. I've written one that's for AWS EFS that does the same. We've got one in there that's unsupported for Gluster, and there's new ones coming along sort of every few weeks. There's some different stuff coming in the next release where we'll support flex volumes and stuff, which allows us a bit more flexibility in the way we mount things, so people will be able to write their own driver, and basically you can back the persistent storage off to whatever you like.
Any more questions? Oh.
Hey, so I was wondering why, or what drove the decision of using an exporter for instrumenting the instrumenting Rancher to expose those metrics instead of natively instrumenting Rancher?
It's a good question. So that was my decision in that. So I don't work for Rancher in any way, and the time we started working with Rancher is in the beta, and if I'm honest, they probably had bigger fish to fry. So we put in the metrics exporter as a way to sort of do that now. We have been talking about, I better get in trouble for that, we have been talking about the ability for Rancher to have its own /metrics endpoint at some stage, and then obviously we can get rid of that, and that'd be great, because that is obviously the ideal way to do it.
Yeah.
No more questions? All right, please.
Thank you very much.
Just